Okay, so first of all, I just want to say congratulations for making it this far. We've accomplished a lot, and we've gone through a lot of this so quickly in just 7 lessons so far. So there's so much more that I want to share, but I'm really excited at everything that we've accomplished so far. We're now at the final lesson, and I want to go through the compositing process and bring everything that we've done so far together. I'm using Nuke for this, but you're welcome to use Fusion or After Effects if you prefer. I use Nuke because it's the industry standard. It's what I learned to use at Industrial Light and Magic, and obviously a lot of other big studios like Weta, Framestore, MPC, most of the industry use Nuke as their primary compositing platform. Now, I would love to go back at some point and revisit this particular lesson once I'm back in LA at the studio. But for now, I'm going to have to work remotely from Canada to do this lesson on one of my machines in LA. Which again, I think is pretty amazing that you're able to work on shots from another country from a laptop. So I know a lot of us are really excited to take our training to the next level and continue into the bootcamp, since there's close to 40 lessons included inside of the course, not to mention all the other bonuses that I've got up my sleeve that I'm going to be mentioning pretty soon. One of them, not to ruin the surprise, but I'm toying with the idea of maybe giving all the students who sign up this week access to Venom as well, so they can create a lot of the effects based on the movie Venom, which I think will be really fun, as well as some other bonuses again that I haven't mentioned just yet. But I'm really excited to see if this is something that you want to commit to and continue your training with me. But for now, I want to focus on our last lesson in the training, and we're going to go through compositing all of our render elements together and really focusing on taking our shots through all the way to final, performing all of the color grading, a lot of the techniques that we've been applying so far. We're going to really push our elements even further. So I really want us to make the most out of what we can accomplish throughout all of this free training. Let's get started. The main elements. I won't be doing a complete shot, which is unfortunate. It was my plan to go very heavy into the comp. Yeah, this is a first for me. So basically this is the basic setup. So initially we have a plate, and I wanted to talk about this for a moment just because I really wanted to kind of replicate this process where typically when files come in from the studio or from the client, usually they're going to come in with the frames from the chosen take in the offline edit. So in other words, they're not going to start from frame 0. They're going to start from, like, in this case, 2232, I think it is. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to go through the process of retiming or setting up the shot, doing the tracking, everything else. And at that point, that's when you start to set up your VFX shots, and that's what starts at frame 0 or frame 1, sometimes frame 1000 if that's the case as well. And the whole process of this is to allow you locally to work at whatever frame setup you want, but when it comes to final output, usually you're submitting shots back at the original timing, or else you know, it's going to get flagged by editorial for them to put it into the shot. But yeah, usually the frame numbers are going to be, like this case, 2232. So what's going to need to happen is you're going to need to offset the timing. And so basically what happens is there's two things. First of all, the camera trackers will track the shot and usually spit out frames as is, and then everything needs to get retimed, or sorry, offset to start at frame 1. Other times also it might be frame 1000. Some studios prefer to work that way. And it makes sense if editorial changes and basically the shot duration changes, they might want to have extra frames added. And if it starts at frame 1 and they add an extra 30 frames, it's a major pain in the butt because you got to go into negative frames, it becomes a headache. Whereas just going to frame 970 or whatever makes a lot more sense. So that's just one thing to consider, is just we're doing an offset here, okay? And same thing with the roto. So down here, the roto department would do the same thing. They would have all of their layers all offset as well. Okay? And if you're looking through the roto, just go to where you got your original files from. They'll be located in there. Okay. It's been updated to have all the roto. Okay, so All the roto, same deal. It's tracked by the plate, and this is usually happening while the VFX shot's all getting initially set up. So at that point, they all need to get offset. So we have these frame offsets with -2232, and that's going to snap it back to frame 1. Okay, and in this case, we start at frame 70, but we're rendering from frame 70, and that's because prior to frame 70 is just footage. There's no VFX, so we still have all of that. It's just we're not doing any effects on it. And then it goes into effects. We have the roto, we have everything all set up. Okay, so just for now, I'm going to disconnect the roto. Okay, but the main thing is that when we bring in our node, and I jumped ahead here, like I said, I'm working remotely from Canada, having to log in. This is not the best scenario. I may come back and do a bonus lesson when I get back to LA to send out to everyone that really goes a lot more in depth. It's just, yeah, this wasn't planned, but basically, this is our VFX element. The other thing is I'm only going to focus on the first building here, but everything that we do will work with the other buildings as well. Just again, I'm just going to focus on the first layer. All right. And so this would be our VFX element. It obviously doesn't have the secondary elements like the rocks coming up, which I think really makes the shot. So that would be something that you will have, but I just don't have on my end. But those secondary rocks are really cool. That would be in there as well. There's also, I wanted to go and do an additional layer where we add a lot of tessellated edges and add a lot of detail to all the fragments, and that's just something, again, time-wise we weren't able to get to. But those are all things I would love to cover at a later date. So the main thing is that we're going to unpre-mult everything, and essentially that just means any transparent edges are all going to get clamped, I guess would be the best way to describe it, or averaged. And it's just temporarily we unpre-mult everything so that way they're all neutral, they're all 1 and 0, and then later we bring it all back again so that way they're all good. Okay, so that's again something that I'll get into another time, but basically this is a good workflow so that way you don't get a lot of fringing or halos and weird edges. So you'll unpre-mult everything as part of the process. At a reformat node, it's always better to work at the target resolution rather than doing everything at a smaller 1K res and then upgrading everything later, because that way your roto, everything might be done at 1 res, it just doesn't convert over as well. So it's better just to work at our target res. So I've got a reformat node which just brings it back to 1536 by 790. Okay. Since all we have is this node, the read node, unpre-mult it, reformat it, and then from there I have a bunch of shuffles, and these shuffles are bringing in the diffuse layer, the GI, you know, all the V-Ray lighting, spec. We'll go through all the layers. I have a constant set up for the same resolution, and that's just so that way it has something for these to blend over. And as you can see, I do an over, and then I plus the rest of these. I don't have my reflection on right now, but the reflection I would just want to, like, I don't really care too much about it, but like, basically, I would want to blend it down a little bit. So it's adding all these layers together. The only one that's not plussed is the shadow, which I initially do a from, and that just kind of averages it out a little bit, and then I can plus it if I want to play with the grade. You know, something like this, where I'm just playing with the color of the shadows, stuff like that. Okay. So that would be the main setup. All right, it's just these nodes here. It's just pulling all these in individually. So we got the GI, the lighting, the spec, reflection, all of these. Okay. So that brings us all of our layers. Now, if you ever need to as well, you can always do a let me just bring this up. You can do a shuffle. Sorry, a shuffle copy. So let's just say that instead of this, I wanted to bring in my diffuse. but you'll notice the diffuse doesn't actually have an alpha. So we need to do a shuffle copy and then pull the alpha in from over here. So we say red, green, blue, alpha. And that way you'll get that set up correctly. Alright, so those would be the layers. Finally, we can put a bit of a grade on there. I'm going to get into these in a moment. We'd put a grade on, and the grade would just allow us to push the highlights and the black points, so we can just bump these up a little bit. You can also sample the plate itself if you wanted to as well. Finally, you would have a pre-mult, and that's just going to bring all the edges back together again. And then the only other thing here is right now, you don't need this, but what I'm using, because I'm using the original plate, and I just wanted to talk about this. You don't need this because you're using the flattened plate. But basically, whenever you shoot something, a lens is round. It has distortion, especially a wider lens has more distortion in the glass. So because of that, especially on a wider lens like a 12mm or an 18mm, there's going to be a lot of distortion on the edges. So what usually happens is the camera tracker needs to put out a flattened grid, and that is one that you essentially you essentially capture the distortion through a lens distortion grid, and then you invert the distortion to create a flat version of everything. So that way you don't get any weird distortion based on the lens. And what will happen then, and this is something that like the lens distortion grid, the VFX supervisor will capture on set, but what will happen then is you use the flatten plate to do all the camera tracking. You use it to do all the 3D, because that way, a flat table, geometric wise, is going to be flat, and when you have polygons, they're going to be flat as well. But if you were to use the original shot plate, there might be that distortion in there, so a flat table ends up being round, which obviously just won't match up in CG very accurately. So what happens is you'll work on a flat plate, and it's only when it comes back to doing the final comp that you apply the distortion to everything, so that way it redistorts it back to what the original lens had. So I just want to include the stuff here just to talk about it, but it's not something that you need to worry about yourself, at least not right now. Okay, so this gives us this, and finally I've got a shuffle for the MultiMat, and if we look at the original MultiMat, if I did red, green, blue, we'd see that the blue is the CG, the green is the projection plate. So I'm just going with the green for this layer, so I get the alpha, and I plug the alpha needs to be green there. I plug this into my color correct, and I do the same thing for the CG version, which would be the blue, I think it was. I plug that in as well. So going back to this for a second, what this allows, this one is a color correct, by the way, and the other one I use a grade. It's just by choice, depending on what I need to do. But what this allows is that I would be able to color correct just the plate or the CG projection, or I can get my grade, and same deal, I could do the CG as much as I wanted. So this is how I can get one render pass, but I can color correct different parts of it however I wanted. So all I've done is I just played with my white points here, just to try and get like more a feel for what I want. And same thing with the color correct plate. I introduced a little bit more blue, and I pulled the gain right down to kind of match it up. Now, one thing I could do is I could go back here, I could get my merge node hit 1, and then get my time offset hit 2, and that way I've bound these viewers to each key. So then I could click and choose wipe and say wipe between 1 and 2, and I could blend between the CG. So 1, 2. And this is handy just because that way I can come in here, I can get my color correction plate, and I can play with the levels. Until I get something that I'm more happy with. So let's go to an earlier frame.
Alright, so this is a good example. So this is the live action, this is the CG. And it just means that now, if I wanted to, I could kind of match this up fairly quickly to get like something that matches pretty well to from one to the other. And again, I'm just going through this really quick, but you get the idea. I could even get the darks and pull, sorry, the contrast of the darks. Maybe it's the mids. Yeah, if I wanted to, I could just play with that a little bit. I mean, that looks pretty good to me. So that's just typically how I'll quickly get like CG set up. And again, I am skipping over a lot here. Just, you know, unfortunately, like I said, this is how I need to go through it. The CG, definitely I need to work on the grade. It's mainly, this is just one bit I don't like. Personally, I would have gone and used Substance and made a good textured building and gone full CG wherever I needed to. So the area here, back here, is actually just because it's using a projection. It's just not working out too well. Because it's basically, this area here is using the plate projection, as we can see. So there is things I could do. I could get the brights, and I could use that to pull it down, and at least that way it's not as distracting. Because it's just really white back there, because it's pulling from essentially the background, just like a little area of it. So I might do that and just introduce more blues, just gonna make it fit a bit better with everything else going on. So either way, I mean, there's definitely going to be areas that just aren't going to look good right now. These are tech fixes that I would personally go back and adjust. Might just desaturate this a little bit. But like I said, for now, I'm just going to have to roll with it. But yeah, these are definitely things that I would probably go back in CG and just adjust the model a little bit, or else make these entirely CG. The other thing you can do is also render out an entire CG version of the model as well as the blended one, and that way you can just roto in areas that you want to just switch to being entirely CG. And that way, things like that would work better. But all in all, like I said, I'm going through this kind of quick, but hopefully it's not that big a deal. You get the idea of like where this is going. The main thing is, and I haven't touched these at all yet, these are our CG elements. And, you know, there's definitely things I would change about them going back and having a look, but let's go through this really quick. Obviously, this is the first element. I haven't toyed with these at all yet, but I'm just going to throw a color correct. I want this to be subtle, but I also don't want it to be, so I'm going to play with the colors. And we can kind of push. Let's see, I just want to make sure we're viewing this. Alright, so I'm just going to yeah, there's not too much information there to play with. Sorry, wrong node. I'm just going to play with the gain a little bit and pull these back just slightly. I'm going to shift this over a little bit. I'm going to add a glow. And a second glow. So I'm going to use the second glow here. I'm going to set my size big. So I'm going to set it to like 150. So that's going to blow it out a lot. The other glow, I'm going to set this to like 5. But the brightness I'm going to really pull down low. It's just going to have a hint of glow. And then finally, we don't need to have this as intense, so I could just kind of make it more subtle. And that way we've got this kind of interesting effect where when these glows turn on, they're going to be pulsing, they're going to send all this stuff down. It's going to look pretty cool. And yeah, it's just overall going to help with this. There's other things we can do with this. For now, I'm just going to leave it as is. But let's also introduce, let's see, we got these beams, these beams, these beams. Yeah, let's keep them in order. There's definitely things I would tweak. For instance, this electrical pattern, I'd have another crack at it. I would slow the phasing down. I would add a bit more range of density in there, a few things like that. But for now, let's throw this in. I'm going to steal these glows. Oops. This one I might set to like 250. I'm going to bring the brightness. Actually, I might crank the brightness a little bit. And I might just... crank that a little bit as well. Okay, finally... I throw a color correct. And I might actually shift both of these to being a slightly different blue, but for now let's just see what we get. Just pushing more blue there. I might do the same here. Let's see what I can do. I might, yeah, okay, I won't worry about it yet. I might have to tinker around with this in a little bit. For now we also have, you know, we can wipe it down, but I actually like the idea of it being really intense. Oops. So keep that at 1. Okay, so this here, I'm just going to screen this on, which means it'll use the luminance for it. And it's just more to kind of give us a noisy breakup. Now, I just want to view this element by itself for a second. I'm going to put a color correct. I'm going to add contrast. I'm going to pull the, I guess the gain, yeah, the gain down. Just so we get something like that. And as you can see, it's just going to give it this slight noise breakup, which works pretty well. I'm just going back to my old merge for a sec. I just want to see if I... Yeah, I'll keep it at 1 for now. Okay. Just going to move all of these up. Okay. So these are these guys, and I always knew that these would look ugly as hell, but that's fine. So a couple of things I'm going to do here. I'm going to add 2 glows. Let's keep them off for a second. I'm going to add O-Flow, and O-Flow will add to the whole shot later on. That's going to add motion blur. But I'm going to do it specifically to this element right now. O-Flow can get a little slow. I'm going to set output speed to 100. Oh, sorry, to 1. Because I'm just focusing on a section. I'm going to say 70 to 200. Shutter. I'm going to give it 4 samples. Shutter time. This would be how much motion blur, basically. I want to say, oops, not that many. 6 samples, 0.5. And this just gives it a nice motion blur to it. Other than that, I'm going to add a color correct. Let's just push it in the same color space. So as you can see, I knew that this would be something that we do a lot of in comp, rather than anywhere else for these elements. So I'm going to add a lot more blue, pull the reds down, and the green will be how can I neutralize it. Okay, finally I'm going to add glow. And this is going to be like the other ones are going to have like a really big glow as well, so I don't really need this to be too intense. It's mainly the other element. And this one, make much bigger and way more intense. So all of these together, it's going to work pretty well because now we've got like all these moving parts that are going to work out pretty well. So let's do a slight preview for a second. It is a little intense, obviously, but there's a lot going on. like I said, I'm not worried about this element. There is actually, I did check, I think some of these elements I might need to render the beams out again. They didn't quite render all the way through. So again, I'm just focusing on these two elements, and I apologize. This is the first time ever I've kind of done a lesson sloppily, and it's my fault for deciding to launch everything before Christmas. It was just poor timing. So, like I said, I may email everyone who's doing this training some revised lessons afterwards. But just focusing on these two elements, forgetting this guy for now, I think this is working out pretty well. Okay. And there's other things we can do to this. I could do like a eye distort. I don't know if I'm really going to get into it, but basically I could basically distort the elements based on let's say the beam or whatever I wanted, and that way I could distort the background as well. So I might get into it right now, but this is just something that if we wanted to, we could totally set up a displacement for this, so that we can get like heat distortion sort of effect in the background. Again, I'm not really going to get that intense into it right this minute, but let's look at adding the dust explosions. Oh, there's the heat, sorry, the blast as well. So this is around 180, I think. So let's look for this element. Okay, so this is here. So for now, I'm just going to focus on this element, this area. And this is always, that's why we did black and white, because I always figured this is going to be a really intense element. I'm just going to copy these, because, I mean, it's all the same kind of stuff. I might do another O-flow on this, because it's another fast-moving element. And that way we get that instead of this, okay? And then I'm going to color correct it a little bit. In fact, I'm going to delete the color correction. Basically, we can make this more of a blue. We add that in, and now we're going to get this intense blast. And we could probably go over the top with this glow, like really over the top. So this is like kind of looking at blowing out the screen a little bit. So let's try 400, but I'm going to crank the brightness even more. So as you can imagine, as the stuff comes down, again, ignoring this guy here, I'm going through this kind of quick. As you can imagine, it's pretty intense. So for now, I'm just going to turn that guy off, and let's go into the explosions. Now, again, just going to do this really quick, because unfortunately I'm going to have to keep this lesson pretty short. But we have fire, smoke, all that stuff in here. I'm going to set up 3 color corrects. And I'm going to set up 3 shuffles. And we'll do this in order: fire, smoke, dust. So this would be fire, I'm not going to label them, smoke, dust. Okay? So if we look at this element, this is our RGB mat, and this is all of the elements together. So we have fire, smoke, dust. Alright, so we got red, green, blue. Okay? And so what I want to do is I want to get a shuffle. I want to say, well, actually I don't need to shuffle anything. I'm just going to say fire was red, so we'll set at least the alpha to red. and then blue for the smoke, and then green for the fire. So finally, we drop this in, and if I want to color correct the fire, let's say I want to desaturate it slightly. Let's make a bit of room. Alright, let's see. Alright, so that's interesting. Okay, I'm killing myself here. Yeah, I have made a few foobarrs in this lesson. So again, just because I'm doing it all remote. So this guy here doesn't have the math set up correctly. So as you can see, the reds are appearing here, they're not appearing here. Yeah, sorry, this is a bit embarrassing. So just ignoring that, I'm going to keep plowing through this, but as you can see, we're intensifying our fire. We can desaturate the fire a little bit, or we could shift it to be more of a warmer explosion, whatever we want to do. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that one. I might redo this tonight, but we can color correct those. We could also include, for the smoke, we can control to make that darker. So here we can see we can pull the smoke right down. We could desaturate it a little bit if we wanted to. More importantly, the dust. We can pull that down. We can pull the contrast down on it a little bit, whatever we want to do. Saturate a little bit more, that sort of thing. So this is going to give us, a lot of intensity there. So the last thing I want to do, though, and it's frustrating because, yeah, I actually didn't catch this, just because I'm remotely accessing everything, which is no excuse. But with these elements, let's say I want to intensify this fire up here, okay? I could actually, what would be the best way to do this? I can get a, I guess I could get a merge here. I can merge it directly over the fire. So here's how I would do it. I would do a shuffle copy and pull directly in 1, the fire, 2, the fire mat. So if we look at these now, I could say red, green, blue, and then the fire mat would be red over here. And that's going to give me just the alpha of the fire. So then I can plug this in. And suddenly I've got the fire just as a separate element. So I can add a color correct, bump up the brightness a little bit, contrast, make it more hot. I might need to pre-mult this. Alright, there we go. Just because there's a lot of color information that's being wasted. So if we pre-mult it, then it's just going to use that color information. So basically that will allow us to pull in just that element, but I can then use that, and I'm just going to copy paste any glow on top. But I could essentially then add like a really intense glow to this. And another one. And this one, make it a lot bigger, make it a lot less bright. And this just means that suddenly, whenever we have these fires, just wait for it to pan over, flare out, the fire automatically will glow, it'll flare, do all the things that we want. So I'm kind of going through this kind of quickly, but hopefully that makes sense. Like, we've got a lot of control now. The only downside is some of these don't have that, control, because I didn't render out the full MultiMat. But, we have complete control here where we can color correct just the dirt. I could sample actual colors of dirt if I wanted and push the colors more towards that, whatever I wanted to do to this. So again, those are things that can be extremely useful when working on these kind of sims. So I might get the gamma in the mid section to kind of pull that down a little bit. And meanwhile, I can pull the darks up. I guess there's not too much dark information. Okay, I'll pull the contrast back. Sorry, it's really laggy on my end. Alright, anyway, to get the idea, like, there's a lot of control that we can have through this practice, and that's really what I've been trying to push. So that being said, like, there's definitely more I want to add in here, but, unfortunately, I'm not going to keep bringing it up, but, like, this is the best I can do for now. But these elements, if we go back to, like, 0 to 200, I've gone through this very quickly, but we've managed to pull in a whole setup. There's definitely render glitches, and these are called tech fixes. Essentially, it means that, it's things that you can continue your work and do what you got to do, but before final output, you go back and fix up like a missing element or a flickering frame, or let's say, your MultiMat's not functioning properly, whatever it is. But if we look at least these minus the couple of bad frames, I might, or the bad elements, I might just quickly add on a final O-flow, and this is for everything. And there's also grade and things like that we could do as well. I've just kept this fairly simple. So with the O-flow, I'm going to set this to 1. Pretty similar settings as before, like 4 samples, 0.5. And we'll just add an overall motion blur to it. I could add a grade. I'm just going to use a color correct, I think. And just if we wanted to, shift the grade around a little bit. We've got like the settings we need to be able to do this. If you wanted, another option also is to put the explosions behind all the laser stuff. So that's also something we can at least experiment with possibly doing. So that would be just linking these up. And that way all the laser effects will sit on top, which probably makes a bit more sense to do. Alright. So I'll play this out, and there's a few other things I want to talk about, but like I said, I've gone through this kind of quick, and there's definitely things that I would go back and fix. Obviously, there's more I'd work on. Okay, so there's definitely plenty that I would add to this, but in terms of the general look of it, I mean, if you imagine it being all 4 buildings, then there's a lot of really cool effects going on here. There's definitely things I would add to this. I think having a bit of a shockwave or some kind of effect coming over everything, like hitting the water, everything as that happens, I think that could be really cool. There's definitely a lot more elements I'd love to do to this, and I personally would love to come back and once I'm back in LA and just add the extra elements I'm talking about, just having all the secondaries, having a lot of additional things, because there's definitely a lot more we can do with this. In terms of base elements, I think this is working really well. I think putting these behind the explosions is actually a better idea, kind of put it in the foreground just to see, but I would put the beams, at least, like these constant beams, I would put them in the background, the overall plasma in the foreground, things like that. But I definitely feel like, once all these buildings were being destroyed, one by one as they come on, I think this could be really, really awesome. So there's definitely, like I said, a lot more we can do with this. Just unfortunately, I kind of shot myself in the foot with doing this training in the fact that I didn't get it done before I left LA. And because of that, I just don't have a computer to actually finish it on. But it's definitely, you can see the potential of all the elements. Obviously, you can do all this. You can go through and do everything we talked about. I just had a few tech glitches I need to fix, such as a couple of the render VFX nodes for the MultiMat. I didn't get those rendered. I've got to look into why that is. Same deal with the beams coming down, because I know they simulated, but I just got to check what happened there. There's a few things like that. But overall, I'm liking the setup. I'm liking what we're doing with all of this. And there's definitely, a lot more explosions, things like that are going on. I think I rendered out all of the explosions here, but we've got all those elements and everything. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of see what we can do with this and where we can take it. And I think there's also a lot more we can do with this shot to really step it up.
Okay, I hope you got a lot from this training. This was a lot of fun to put together, and it's definitely something I'd love to revisit at a later date, and especially once I'm back stateside in LA. So obviously we've accomplished a lot in just 8 lessons, and we've had to definitely go through it at a very quick pace because there's so much to cover in just a small amount of time. But I hope that this was something that really opened your eyes to different processes and ways to do things. Obviously, this is just the beginning, and as I mentioned, if the Visual Effects Bootcamp is something that you want to be a part of, then this is your chance to sign up. The training won't be available after this week, but if you do sign up during this time, you'll have lifetime access to it, and you'll be able to log in whenever you want and watch the training forever. So I don't want to mention how many hours, because there's about 100 hours of training in the course, but I'd rather focus on it being, it's about 40 videos, about 37, 38 videos for the core training. There's a lot, and we cover a lot really in depth, really thoroughly, a lot of hand holding during that time. But like I said, there's going to be a few bonuses such as Venom and a few other things that I want to mention to you guys in the next couple of days as well. So if this isn't something that you want to do, then that's totally fine. I want you to enjoy this training and treat this as my gift to you as you've gone through the City Destruction training. I want to try and give out as much free training where I can, whenever I can. But I know for a lot of us, I want to look at where we are today and where we could be 4 weeks from today by taking that next step and really investing in our career and investing in ourselves. So if this is something that you want to do and join us on the inside and be a part of this course, then I'd suggest taking action while there's still seats available. Either way, this has been really great to see all of the amazing work that a lot of you have been able to do during this time, and I definitely will try to give as much as I can where I can, but make the most of the training while you have access to it. So even though you've gone through video 8, I still suggest you going through the other lessons, see where things may not have clicked, that you could go back and really get clarity on those things while you have access to it. And set goals with even going and now creating a new visual effects shot based on the training you've done, whatever you want to do to build up that visual effects reel. And like I said, it may sound ridiculous, but the industry is so small that I do hope that one day we get to work together. It happens a lot. There's been plenty of productions that I work on that people have come up and said, hey, I got into the industry because of your training, or I did this thing and this what got me the job I'm at now. Like, it's been really cool to see that, but it's become quite common as well. So I mean it when I say that maybe we'll end up working together one day. I'd love to see what you can accomplish with this training. So again, use the time that you have, make the most of it. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time to go through this training and giving me the opportunity to serve you as you've gone through the City Destruction. So thank you.